Today on the Pitchbook podcast, Zach is pitching Tuesdays with Morrie by Mitch Albom, and I am pitching The Power of Regret by Daniel Pink. Batter up! Zach, how are you?
Good, Matt.
What is new? Anything exciting and new? We usually talk about some crazy thing we're going to talk about. I don't know if I've had anything crazy happen. Have you?
No, I haven't had anything crazy happen. I mean, our daughter's she's in San Jose, California, and it's 100 degrees there. It's like 80, feels like 80 something in Utah. The weather has just been awesome.
Yeah.
That's about it.
Yeah. It's I agree. I feel like I've been busy, but I couldn't tell you why or what. So let's just get straight into it.
Let's do it.
Tuesdays with Morrie. I have heard about this book. I know Mitch because he's a sports writer, I believe. And I know this book, but I can't remember. Is it he's just going to visit a guy that is dying? I can't remember. You're gonna have to tell us the story, but
Okay.
tell us why are you reading this? I know it's a pretty famous book, so a lot of people think, Matt, you're an idiot. You don't know anything about this book. I'm surprised. You shouldn't be that surprised that I don't know anything. That's like pretty normal.
Yeah, you see it on Library Mindset, which is an Instagram page I follow, and they'll post these stacks of books with the binders. I don't know if you follow them on Instagram.
No.
But they'll have like top 10 books or top 25 books, and they'll all be stacked, like books you should read. And so I'll like pause my Instagram and I'll go through line by line and look at all the bindings of each book in their stack.
Okay.
And this is a book that has been on a couple different of those. And it was kind of interesting. I'm like, Tuesdays with Morrie. I wonder what this is about. And it's really
so you didn't know anything about it. You just saw that on there.
I didn't know anything about it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
very good.
Yeah, I just randomly downloaded it, listened to it on Amazon, and so the story is it's this. It starts out this sports writer Mitch Albom. He becomes a sports writer.
Oh, okay.
He talks about this professor that he had, Morrie Schwartz. And when he graduates from college, he loved this professor so much that he gave him this leather briefcase. And I don't know about you, but when I finished college, I didn't give any of my professors a briefcase. I don't know why that stuck out in my mind, but I'm like, he must have really liked this professor.
Did you have a professor you liked a lot? I'm not to get sidetracked here, but
no, not. I mean, not really.
I had. Let me just tell you, really sidebar.
Okay.
I am interested to hear. I didn't realize he was a professor that he liked, but I had a professor that had a really big influence on me. He was my political science, I guess, professor, but not that I majored in that or anything. But I was on the mock trial team, and he kind of coached us up. Little Weber State, we ended up taking 10th in the nation, and he was really good. And I actually was thinking to myself. He actually ended up moving schools and taking winning nationals for mock trial out of a small school out of Virginia. And I meant to like write. I always was like, I should write him a letter just to tell him like what an effect he had on my life. And great guy, really, really smart guy. He would just like quote constitutional law to you like just off the top of his head. And he was just really smart, but really passionate about that kind of stuff. And I was like, I should write him a letter because he was awesome. And it turns out he'd like passed away a few years ago. And now I regret that I did write him a letter.
And you didn't write him a book either.
I did not write him a book. I did not spend Tuesdays with him. And, and it's interesting that I just mentioned that I regret something. So that will come into play later on my book. So sorry to interrupt. Go ahead. So he gave him
I'm going to come back to this idea of writing people. Because I think you tapped into something that.
Yeah. So tell me. So he really enjoyed this professor. I assume he went to school for journalism.
I think so. Yeah. He graduates and then goes on with life. The professor says, let's stay in touch. Okay. Yeah, we'll stay in touch. And then they never do. 16 years go by and he happens to be watching, I think it was Nightline with Ted Koppel or whatever Ted Koppel's show was back in the day. think my grandma used to make me watch all of those. I know who Ted Koppel is.
Yes.
And he's watching this program, and Ted Koppel is there interviewing his old professor, Morrie Schwartz. And the interview is about how Morrie is having this battle with ALS, which
Mm,
is Lou Gehrig's disease.
mhm,
So it just like strikes a chord, and he kind of ignites this relationship, goes back and starts visiting with Morrie, and he tells him, I'm going to come meet with you every Tuesday.
mhm,
So they later on in the book, you find out that they had kind of devised this plan to help pay for Morrie's medical bills by
mhm,
writing this book, and the proceeds would go to help Morrie's family pay for his medical expenses.
mm.
And it's a really debilitating disease over time. You're going through this slow death, and as he visits,
Is it mostly physical or is it's not mental? I can't
not
remember.
yeah, not mental
Okay,
at
so it's
all.
just physically, so it'd be super
Yes,
frustrating.
trapped
Your
in his
mind is
body.
totally there, but your body
Yes,
can't do it. Okay, so that's got to be
exactly.
horrible.
Yeah,
Okay.
speech gets slower, movement disappears. In
Hmm.
fact, towards the end of the book, Morrie is talks about. Um, I'm gonna get emotional. He talks about this life stage that he's in, where he's having to let people physically take care of him,
Hmm.
wipe his backside, clothe him, bathe him, move his body around. And he just has this great outlook on life. So when he goes back to meet with Morrie each Tuesday, he's writing down these different life experiences that Morrie's sharing with him. They're kind of like life lessons
Hmm.
that they're capturing in each chapter. So I wanted to get your thoughts on some of the principles that
Okay,
Morrie lays out.
great.
And one underlying theme all the way throughout the book is the importance of love and relationships. So, Morrie emphasizes that love is the foundation of a meaningful life. He stresses that deep, caring relationships with family and friends are what give life purpose. Morrie believes that without love, we are lost, and that material wealth or success cannot fill the void left by a lack of connection with others. So, I don't know if you've ever, well, you lost your father. I lost my father as well. Um, can I ask you a personal question?
Of course.
With your father's passing, did you have time to have kind of deep and meaningful conversations, or was it something that was more sudden where you didn't have
So
that opportunity?
a bit of both, which makes no sense until I explain it. He was going in for, I guess what you would consider routine, like heart surgery, fix a valve, and like do a bypass or something. But like pretty, it was almost like he went to get his heart checked, and they're like, "Yeah, we should probably do the surgery." Like no sudden heart attack or anything. It's like, "Yeah, it's scheduled for Monday. We'll go there in a week." So we go down there and we're waiting at the hospital and we're just waiting and it's like, oh, this should take a couple of hours. Well, like 3 hours go by, we don't hear anything. 4 or 5 hours go by. Finally, well, then they send like a liaison to talk to us, like, hey, there's a little bit of complications. We'll get back to you. The doctor comes out, the surgeon, I should say, and he says, sorry, your dad has a very, what he called a generous heart, which I thought was interesting, meaning it was large. And he said, as he tried to close the chest cavity, his heart would stop. So it was, if that makes any sense. So he had to basically slowly close it over time and kind of let the heart deal with the difficulty and keep, then hold it there for a little while, let the heart get used to it. Anyway, so it was a lot more complicated than we expected. And then
Okay.
we were, and so then he was in a rehab facility. So think like retirement home for people that are ill. And so he was stuck there for like 3 or 4 months. So we'd often go up to see him. So, and I live an hour away from where my parents lived. And so on the drive, I had a lot of time to contemplate. And obviously when I would go see him, we would talk. So he lived for another, oh man, probably 9 or 10 months. And then that's why I say sudden because he was on vacation with my mom. And we just get this call from my mom that said he had a heart attack in the lobby of this condo and that they don't think he's going to make it. And so we ended up driving straight down to California and had to take care of all the details after that. So it was like so I'm actually really glad that I had an opportunity to like consider it, because when it was happening, you know, it gives you, because you don't really think about it probably unless there's some sort of disease or some sort, you know what I mean? Like if it's
Yeah,
sudden.
sure, sure.
But so this was kind of a weird, it sounds weird, but in a nice way for me, it was really cool to be able to kind of pre-process, if that makes any sense. And so then when it happened, it wasn't, it was certainly sudden, but not like totally unexpected, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
So anyway, does that answer your question
Yeah, it
at
it
all?
it
Sorry.
does. Well, the book got me thinking about people that I've lost in my life, like my dad,
Hmm.
our youngest or our oldest daughter,
Hmm.
actually. With her, she was kind of nonverbal towards the end, and she was only 6.
Hmm.
So you didn't really have really deep, meaningful conversations with a 6-year-old. But
Yeah.
as you're reading this book, I guess the great blessing, although he was suffering with ALS, is he's sharing his life's lessons. Like, what is
Hmm.
that last thing? I'm sure if I had a conversation with my dad before he passed away, I just wonder what would he have shared, because people
And
don't think, man, I wish I would have closed one more deal. Uh,
what yeah,
you
what
know,
was his passing sudden? I actually don't know the story.
no, it went on for I think several months. Oh, my
Okay.
dad?
Your dad.
Oh yeah, yeah. It
Oh,
was like overnight.
oh, okay. Okay. So you didn't have that opportunity.
Yeah, he was comatose for I think about 6, 7 weeks.
Yeah.
He just yes, kind of stopped breathing, and they tried to get him going again. One day on the podcast, I'll share the full story, but he was kind of out of it, so there wasn't any like coming
Yeah.
out of it and having any cogent thoughts or anything like
Right.
that. So as I'm reading the book, I'm thinking, I wonder if maybe these are things that my dad would have shared with me, probably would have
Hmm.
agreed with them. And number one is the importance of love and relationships. And then the second thing that I pulled from the book is embracing death to live fully, which is kind of an interesting idea.
Hmm.
You would think that being diagnosed with a deathly illness, that you'd be angry and bitter and mad, and he just said you just have to embrace it, and accept that what's going to happen, and by doing that you can live life more fully each day and kind of appreciate each moment that
Yeah.
you have, each
Hmm.
hour. Like, I'm in my mid 40s and I think, oh, I've got another 40 years.
Hmm.
But reading this book, I'm like, but maybe I don't. you know? Maybe I've just have today and that's
Yeah.
it. And
Hmm.
did I live today to the very fullest? But embracing death to live fully. So acknowledging the reality of death allows us to live more fully by accepting death as an inevitable part of life. We can focus on what truly matters, which with your demise coming, you can kind of focus on the things that really do matter.
Hmm.
He talked about in life rejecting cultural norms that don't serve you. So I sent a message to my daughters yesterday and I said, your brain has software in it that, me and your mom have kind of been downloading software into your brains as you've been getting older. If you want to think about it like your brain is a computer, but you are going to have to, find friends that will give you good software and read high quality books that will give you good software,
Or just listen to the
and
Pitchbook podcast and you'll just get all you need to
or
know.
just do that. Yeah, save you a ton of time.
Yes.
But he talks about rejecting cultural norms that don't serve you. And I was thinking, what are the cultural norms living in the US or just in my life that don't really benefit me at all? Like, don't really
Hmm.
bring happiness,
Hmm.
and it's really easy to pull work into that because you think you're focused on gaining that next client or closing that next deal or opening that next store or franchise or whatever it is you do. Doesn't necessarily It usually brings more stress and not more joy and happiness. I don't know what your thoughts are, if there are any norms in
Um,
your life that
yeah, so I would say the thing I've been thinking about a lot, and I don't mean to like, I'm not like anti-consumerism or anything like that. I'm not by any stretch, if you know me. But I have been realizing that like you, as you get older, then you kind of realize like, hey, wait, I might have to retire sometime soon, and I might want to have my future self will thank me today for,
Current self, yeah.
not buying this. And but anyway, I think a little bit about that, and I think there's a really good quote from Colin Cowherd, who's a sports talking head, basically. And he's actually pretty. I think he's actually pretty smart, regardless if you agree with the sports stuff. One of the things that he always talks about, because he has a house in Park City, he talks about renting your fun and not buying your fun. So that's kind of what I think. Like people that have like a boat, and obviously if you have money
Hmm.
to buy a boat, great. Or if you have four wheelers or whatever you enjoy, that's maybe an expensive hobby. Um, I just liked the idea of like renting those, like, oh, I'm gonna go rent some wave runners rather than like purchase them and then, have that large purchase and I only use them, every couple times a year or
Yeah.
whatever. And having talked to a couple of boat guys, they're like, don't, it's such a hassle. Maybe don't buy the boat. Maybe just find a friend that has a boat. And anyway, so I just like that rent your fun rather than like buy your fun. And that's what it reminds me of is like people are prone to keeping up with the Joneses with their what they purchase and like what car they drive and whatever.
Yeah.
And that's one of the cultural norms that I try to reject at least on large purchases. If my wife listens to this, she's gonna pass out and talk about my shoes or all the stuff that I waste my money on, pickleball
Yeah.
paddles, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Anyway, but I try to keep those to lower, less expensive purchases. Not I don't have a
Yeah.
large
Well,
collection
like
of boats or
you
anything.
you do have a nice pickleball paddle selection. When
I I
I've played with
I've
Matt a
come
couple times and
I've
it's
come to
pretty
a
fun.
conclusion that I am a taste tester and I'm not a there's people that go all in on one thing and I'm more like, oh, I like this hobby or this thing. I'm going to try every little different thing. Anyway,
Within
yeah,
that
within
hobby.
that little area or hobby.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's kind of weird, but yeah. But don't worry,
So
I've sold a few on eBay, Cammy, you know this. So
it's fine.
don't get too mad at me. All right, go ahead.
So, well, his point
Sorry.
is reject the cultural norms that don't serve you.
Right.
So if you're a
That was
taste
off the top of my head.
tester,
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
serves you, it brings you
Yeah.
joy, it brings you
Right.
happiness. And honestly, it's been fun going out a couple times this year playing pickleball with you and your neighbors. Kind of fun for me to
Yeah.
go out there.
You try the new paddle.
I'm on the loser court every round, but it's okay. Try every paddle. But it's fun to try new things. And I think in the book he really just keeps stressing that, to be aware of that. Are you living someone else's life or living
Mhm.
someone else's expectations? And I thought, as a parent, am I putting expectations on my kids that, things that I would like them to achieve, but would
Mhm.
just be a bitter hell for them, in
Mhm.
their lives?
Mhm.
Seek things that make you happy. Okay. The fourth one, he talks about forgiveness. Forgiveness frees us from emotional burdens that allows us to move forward with peace and clarity. This one can be tough. For those listening, I know a lot of people have been through some really difficult things in their lives. It's hard to let go of that. I can think of a few things in my family's life that have been challenging. Maybe not me personally with my parents, but I have some extended family that just had their lives absolutely ravaged through some terrible choices. And man, like, how extreme is that to forgive? I don't know. I don't know if I could forgive every single thing, but he stresses how important it is to be able to forgive someone and let go of that. Otherwise, it has you. You're captured.
Yeah. So I'm going to tell a quick story, and uh, I won't say who it is, but it's a friend of ours, and you know this person. We can talk off camera, but this lady who's an awesome lady, her dad was actually murdered, and which is rare because or you don't really know. I don't know that many people that have that situation, and and I think she was a teenager at the time, and her mom basically was talked to her kids and said basically we need to forgive the guy that murdered him. And I think they went to the trial and kind of told him, said that to him. And I don't know how impossible that would be for being. Um, but it was really interesting to see how for her it was like you said, it's freeing. It's not a burden to her. Obviously, that's a devastating, horrible thing, but the way that they're hurt, her mom's attitude and the way, kind of waterfall down to the rest of the family seemed to be very important and freeing for them. So
Yeah. Yeah. It's a tough one
yeah,
for sure. So I think maybe forgiveness is something that we practice. You get
yeah, I don't know that I can. I will say I try to be forgiving just because I know I'm not perfect, but I don't feel like I've been totally wronged where I've really had to struggle with something, and I try not to like say, I don't know what it's like to have to forgive somebody for something super horrible that I
but
haven't gone through.
you live in Utah. You deal with traffic. Like
That's
we
true.
can practice every day forgiving the
It's
people
true.
on
You
the
never
side.
know what's going on with them if they're in a hurry or whatever.
All right, and then the last one, and there are other examples that he gives. Living with purpose. So living a life of purpose, helping others, contributing to society, finding something that gives you a sense of satisfaction and significance. Now, he was a college professor, probably didn't have a great income.
Hmm.
And the sad thing with sometimes with these types of diseases, you lose your job, you lose your health insurance, you rack up medical bills. Like your family, you think that all of those benefits would just carry on, but in some cases they don't.
Hmm.
And you're not teaching. This is a debilitating disease. I don't know how long it went on
Hmm.
before he passed away. It doesn't really talk about how long he was diagnosed, but there was certainly enough time for him and for Mitch to get together every Tuesday for several months. But living with purpose, contributing to society, finding things that give you happiness, and in his case, it was teaching, caregiving, and it's not about amassing the most wealth. It's not about how big your bank account is. So reading that book, living in a world of finance, for
Hmm.
me, like my brain is constantly absorbed with that kind of thing. What is somebody's net worth? How much money do they have? Do they have enough to save for retirement? All of those things, my brain is constantly thinking about that. And so it was good for me to read this and be like, you know what? It's okay just to not be focused on that all the time.
Hmm.
Like go find things that kind of break you out of that mindset.
Yeah, I agree with that. Although I will say, stay for your 401k, right? Like I think as I age, and I've been lucky to have you as a friend that has helped me realize how important it is to save. And my future self is going to thank the past self of Zach and the past Matt. But
Oh,
basically, like you don't time just, and this sounds corny, but time just happens so fast. Like suddenly you're way older than you thought you were, and like in theory, I'm like 20 years away from retirement. Like, whoa, that's impossible. Like, how that's crazy. Like, I only got married like 24 years ago. So and that was like that. You know what I
yeah.
mean?
Yep.
So it's as you age, I think obviously you gain some wisdom and perspective, and you realize, hey, while you're contributing to society and all that stuff, like you said, reject some of those cultural norms of like spending more than you have and whatever they might be. But that's just what came to mind when you mentioned it. So
That's true. Yeah.
you know what I
People,
mean?
yeah. We definitely live in a consumerist society for sure, where
And again,
people
I'm
overspend.
yeah, and I'm pro the lifestyle that we have. I just think don't do things that are stupid.
Yeah.
So,
And we do a lot of that in the US for sure. So anyways, that's the gist of the book. So he walks through these and I listened to the audiobook. So I don't think Mitch read the book. Actually, I'm not sure now, but the person who read the book would switch voices. He would do like
mm,
Mitch's voice, and then he would transition to Morrie's voice, like a kind of
how
a.
was that? Was it weird or was it okay?
It was okay. It was
Okay.
okay. It wasn't too weird. I think he did a good job,
Okay.
like sounding like someone with a raspy voice, and so he would transition over. But it helped me to visualize Morrie
Got it.
in those last days. But just him talking about people taking care of him and him being optimistic. He wanted to be in his office, so every day he would try to get in a chair where he could sit in his library
Hmm.
and just feel the sunlight, be out of his bed. Um, those little things that we just take for granted, like going for a walk and not
Yeah,
feeling pain, you know?
yeah, yeah.
So enjoy each day. Tuesdays with Morrie, I give it a solid, solid home run. It's a book I think a lot of people should read just to reset their mind on what they're focused on and get back to basics. Really well
It
done.
uh, it reminds me a little bit of a quote that it's been stirring in my mind because I hit a large number of my age this year that is a round number, and there's something about
30
those
years
round
old.
there's something about those round numbers that anyway, it said it's something to the effect of like, hey, if you're 40, what would you tell your 20-year-old self, right? Like,
Yeah.
and then obviously you kind of regret that you didn't do it. Your 20-year-old self didn't do any of those things that you're giving him advice about. But basically, they said instead, picture yourself 30 years from now, and what does that 30 years ahead of yourself tell you right now, and imagine what that is, and then go for it from that point. So that's kind of like you said, it resets your expectations, and there's something about when you confront your own mortality that makes you realize, to cherish certain things, and I think both you and I have had some unfortunate opportunities to be able to see that mortality be fragile, and it definitely helps you kind of realize how important the time you have is. I don't know. I don't know what I'm saying anymore. The point is, if you're something that you want to do and should do, like write that letter or
Yep.
whatever,
Yep.
then do it because, yeah. All right.
I
Let
had, well, I'm going to share one
Go ahead.
story.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Because you just reminded me of this. I wanted to
Yeah.
circle back to this. So when I was a little boy, I had this best friend down the street. His name, well, maybe I shouldn't. His name was Dusty. I won't say their last name. But his dad, my mom at the time was single. She was providing and carting us about an hour across town to my grandma's so that we could go to school and she'd go to work. It was like this big process every day. But so not having a dad in the home, my best friend Dusty, his dad Mark, became like kind of a pseudo father figure for me,
Mhm.
and it was really formative for me in those young years to feel like, oh, if we need something at our house fixed, Mark comes over, he helps around like whatever my mom needed. He was just a really helpful guy, and he would take me out with his sons camping and
Mhm.
just a really good role model. And a few years ago, I'm like, I am going to write him a letter. So I sat down, wrote him a letter. My mom still has his address. I mailed
Mhm.
it to him,
Awesome. I
gave
love
him
it.
my phone number, and he just sent me a text. He just said something like, tears in my eyes. Thank you so much for that nice letter. I'm like, awesome. Can check that off my list, you know, because he really did impact a young kid, and we can all have those kinds of impacts in our lives. But
Well, yeah, and it's good to acknowledge that because he probably wouldn't didn't think much of it at the time, but
no, not he
yeah.
probably totally forgot about me. I mean, he
Yeah.
remembered who I was,
Sure, sure.
but
But
I
but it probably was not a big deal at the time to like do
yeah,
all that stuff.
and I just told him in the letter, I'm like, here's the things I've accomplished in my life. Here are the things that I'm doing. I'm raising a family. I do this for work, and I've had all these great experiences and opportunities to serve, and blah blah blah. And I just wanted to thank you for like, helping my family be on an okay path and giving us security when things were maybe insecure and
Hmm.
given me opportunities to hang out with you guys and go camping and do those things. It was kind of fun.
That's
So,
cool.
anyways, so
That's very cool.
write
Yeah,
those
see,
letters.
I'm glad.
Maury
Yeah.
approves.
So yeah, ironically, my book is The Power of Regret, and
Well, okay,
it
I want to
reminds
hear about
me,
it.
yeah, and that story of my professor. Obviously, I regret not sending that letter. Um, but yeah, it's cool that you did. So the power of regret is kind of a it's I'm trying to think how I found it. I think it was just on Libby, and I don't remember really how I saw it, but it was kind of interesting, right? Like you're thinking like it's I think you might even talk about it, like you get the tattoo that says no regrets, like just doing whatever I want, no regrets. I don't have any problems. And it's like a super prideful thing to if you think about it, like to if somebody says they truly have no regrets, I mean, really? Like you've never
Yeah,
made any mistakes that you wish you hadn't. Come on.
right,
You know what
right.
I mean? And he
Yeah,
basically
sure.
says like you should embrace regret. like he basically says, let's reclaim it and say, you know, living a life without regrets is not a is detrimental and like prideful. You know what I mean? To a
Hmm.
point. And that's great. I think he spends a lot of time talking about that, and it's fine and helpful. That quick summary can, I think most people can understand why you would say that. But what's cool about it is he talks about, and I'm gonna have to pull these up here in my notes. He talks about four different types of regrets, and I thought this was a pretty interesting, more in depth way to categorize these regrets. So he talks about foundation regrets, and I'm just going to read this. These involve feelings of inadequacy related to education, health, financial decisions. Ironically, he said an example is wishing one had worked harder in school or saved more. So those are foundation regrets, like um, should have done this. I should have gone to school or
Like you
trade
didn't
school
put enough
or
time into things that
yeah,
would have made your life easier down the road.
correct, yeah. And
Okay.
so
Okay. This is interesting. I've never thought of regrets in this
yeah,
way.
what's weird about what's interesting to me about it was just the fact that you can categorize these and really like I don't know, it was helpful to me to think of it this way. Then he talks about boldness regrets. So these regrets stem from missed opportunities in like love, career, personal growth, basically not taking risks, which I thought was also kind of interesting because how many times like did you like, oh, I didn't ask that girl out, or I should have gone for this job or promotion and I didn't. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Which is totally different than foundational regrets, right? Like it's just their potential things that could have happened, if that makes sense. Then there's moral regrets. So these are, ethical failures or actions that cause harm to others. Obviously, betraying somebody, betraying a friendship or secret or cheating on someone or whatever it may be, right? There's a moral regret. Something that you know you did that was incorrect according to your morals. Then there's connection regrets. So these involve lost relationships or failed connections with family and friends. And I think obviously some of these lines can blur, I would assume, right? To some degree. But I just thought it was kind of cool to like categorize them. Um, I don't know why that was cool to me, other than I think it helps you kind of realize like, okay, I regret that, but maybe it's more of a boldness regret and I shouldn't beat myself up over it, right? Like and what he's saying is you should learn from these regrets and these mistakes
Hmm.
so that in the future you don't make them again, right?
There you go. So there's foundational,
Yep.
boldness, moral,
Moral and connection, right?
connect. Okay. Okay.
And so some of these things are like some of them like foundational, for example. This might certainly I can't go back in time and get a better education, right? And worked harder, but I could pass that regret and knowledge on to somebody else and hopefully they take learn from it. Boldness regrets, again, you can have regrets that you in the future could potentially change, right? Well, I'm going to take this opportunity, I'm going to try this and be more bold or whatever. Moral, obviously, this was horrible, I shouldn't have done this, and try obviously never to do it again, kind of thing, because you don't want to hurt yourself or others. And then connections is kind of what we were talking about, right? Like I regret that I didn't keep in touch with this professor, and it it bothers me, and I, what I mean, like I should, I don't know. So basically the next time, and I think we've talked about this before, I it's not like I write a ton of letters by any means, right? But I will say the one thing I try to do, and I think we've talked about this, correct me if I'm wrong, if I think of somebody like, I wonder how that person's doing, I just try to text them right away. Like
Yeah.
I think, hey, I need to text this person. It's interesting. Ended up, I was talking to a couple buddies of mine that I haven't seen for a while. Just they're great guys, but anyway, I haven't seen for a while. I'm like, hey, look, there's a cool boxing match coming up. You guys should come over. And it was interesting to chat with them because it gave us an opportunity to reconnect and kind of talk about some of the things that are going on in their lives that
Yeah.
potentially are not great, but at least they know I'm here to support them, kind of thing. That makes any sense.
You,
It was
well,
interesting that
you never know what people are
yeah,
going through, and
exactly.
you might be that phone call that walks them back from the ledge, or just feeling
Yeah,
like total
it
loneliness.
just
Yeah,
wasn't what
you are excellent at that.
I just wasn't what I expected, and it would have opened an opportunity to kind of like reiterate, like, hey, you guys are great. Keep doing what you're doing. And anyway, it doesn't really matter. But I will say I try to do that because of some of the regrets I've had on connections. So then he moves into like part three, which is like basically strategies for making regret positive. So he says he calls it a 3-step process: self-disclosure, acknowledging and sharing the regrets to relieve their burden; self-compassion, so neutralizing regret through kindness towards yourself, right? Which may be a little hokey, right? Self-compassion, but basically saying like, hey, look, I messed up. How can I, fix in the future? Don't beat yourself up over it. And then he talks about self-distancing. So he basically says analyze regrets by envisioning future perspectives to gain clarity and understanding. So basically that's the planning part, right? Like here's where how I'm going to avoid this in the future or
Okay.
make sure I do this. So um basically he says that unproductive regret paralyzes us, and productive regret can catalyze change and growth. Um, basically, we can learn valuable lessons if we reflect on those past mistakes and make better choices. And it helps us to be. He talks about the value of reflection, right? It helps us clarify what we really want in life. Can lead to more fulfilling decisions if we reflect on our lives. Obviously, again, somebody who has no regrets, they're not very probably not very insightful in their own life,
Well,
right?
when you think about regret, usually that comes from a place of fear that I did something really bad. I messed my life up. And I think how you're kind of framing this is not a win or lose. It's win or learn.
Yeah.
Like, okay, this happened. I'm gonna learn from it and turn it
And
into a
that
positive action.
and that might be why the categories help me, because there's the regret of like doing something where you hurt somebody else, or were rude to somebody, whatever it is, right? Morally wrong. That's a lot different than like a boldness regret. Does that make sense?
Yeah, sure.
Like, so I think that was helpful when he's talking about like reflecting. There's just different types, I guess. And so
Yeah.
like maybe you should beat yourself up for hurting someone, more than you should. A boldness regret, maybe you don't deserve to be beat up or beat yourself up over a boldness regret, if that makes any sense. But
Well,
essentially it's up to you, right? You reflect on it and you decide what you want to do in the
yep.
future. So does
I
that make
love
sense?
that. It totally makes sense. I like that he breaks it up into different categories. So foundational, boldness, moral, connection. Is
Hmm.
that
And
right?
then, yep.
Those are the four. Okay.
And he basically says like use your regrets as opportunities to be more mindful. And again, I hate that corny word mindful, but like being aware of yourself. Like I do like the word self-awareness, um, because it helps you realize like, okay, it's kind of like what we do in this podcast, right? We read a book or think, how do I apply this to my life? How can
Yeah.
those might not necessarily be regrets, but there may be something we have learned and want to apply or whatever. But essentially, your experience is your experience, and whatever regrets you have, you own them. You might as well use them to your advantage to reflect on yourself and see how you're going to change it. So I really like this book. I'd probably give it a triple, maybe a home run. Um, I think it just again, I think that the coolest thing to me was just the categorization, so that it didn't just say, because it's really, you just say like no regrets, right? Like, okay, well, fine, maybe you're overly bold and you don't regret being bold. That maybe is good, but certainly there's some I would probably guess that everybody has something they regret. So anyway,
There,
I
yeah,
just
of course.
yeah, it's basically let's reflect on yourself, be aware of yourself, and make the changes that you want to make to have whatever life you want. So
Have
anyway.
you seen that skit with the guy from he's on SNL. I have to think of his name. He's like a soccer coach.
Oh yeah, Ted Lasso.
Ted Lasso. I don't,
Uh-huh.
but he's not Ted Lasso in this clip.
Oh,
He's
okay.
married and his daughter brings this guy home and he's got this tattoo on his neck
Uh-huh.
and it says no regrets. Like
Uh-huh.
GRATS.
Yeah.
And he's reading it says no regrets. He's like, really? No
Not at
regrets?
all.
Like
None at
it was
all.
a misspelled tattoo.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yep.
So that's what you reminded me of. No
Yep.
regrets, Matt.
Yeah. So anyway, I think it's really good. And I want to say that it made me look at a few of other Daniel Pink books, but I can't remember off the top of my head if I ever got them or not, but I'll have to look through my history, but that is it. So
Awesome.
go have some regrets. Make sure that they're not regrets about hanging out with Morrie on Tuesdays, right?
Correct.
That's our advice.
Both good books.
Yeah. All right. Thanks everyone for listening to the Pitchbook podcast. Make sure you like, subscribe if you want to be a guest. let us know and we will get you on to pitch us a book. Thanks to Deja Vega for letting us use their music. As always, we appreciate your patronage and helping us out by checking out the Pitchbook podcast. Tell your friends, and we'll catch you next time on the Pitchbook podcast.